I'm Thessaly Monroe, and at 29, I reckon I've carved a life most folks only dream of, piloting my own tech empire and a private jet to boot. 11 years back, my mama, Evelyn, called me a fool, slapped me raw, and tossed me out our Greenville, Ohio home like yesterday's laundry, all 'cause I said no to a man she'd picked to chain me down. Last week, I stepped off that jet with my 5-year-old Nora, clutching a letter from Mama that hinted at secrets buried deeper than a coal mine. The look on my folks' faces when they saw us roll up in a sleek black car, well, it was worth every tear I shed. If you're watching, drop a comment with your hometown and hit that subscribe button for more tales of grit and glory on this old YouTube channel. Now, let me spin you a yarn that starts in a town so prim it could have been painted by Norman Rockwell, where lawns stayed clipped and secrets stayed hushed. I was 18, a girl with a head full of code and a heart set on MIT. But Mama had other plans. Evelyn Monroe wasn't just strict, she was a general in pearls, commanding our home like a fortress of propriety. My daddy, Harold, was a bookkeeper with a spine softer than a featherbed, nodding to Mama's decrees while tossing me sorry looks when her tongue cut too deep. A lady don't defy her mother, she'd preach, her auburn hair stiff as her rules, while I dreamed of algorithms and freedom. Our house gleamed like a postcard, all white shutters and rose bushes, but inside, it was a cage. Mama cared more for what the neighbors thought than what I felt, picking my clothes, my hobbies, even my future. I'd sneak coding books under my bed, hiding them like forbidden treasure, while she pushed me toward cotillion and tea parties. By 15, I was pushing back, wearing sneakers instead of her frilly dresses, begging to join the school's coding club instead of her ladies' auxiliary. Each rebellion sparked a skirmish, with Mama's voice sharp as a switch and Daddy's silence loud as thunder. That letter, though, arrived like a ghost at midnight, its words cryptic, hinting at a family shame Mama'd never spoke of. It stirred something in me, not just for my own sake, but for Nora, who started asking why she ain't got grandparents like her pals. So I booked a jet, packed Nora's favorite dress, and headed back to Greenville, heart pounding like a drum. What secrets was Mama hiding? Would facing her heal old wounds or open new ones? Stick with me, folks, and subscribe to find out how this tale unfolds. The Monroe house in Greenville, Ohio, stood like a monument to respectability, its white clapboards and trimmed hedges fooling folks into thinking all was right within. But behind those lace curtains, my mama, Evelyn, ruled like a queen with a scepter of judgment, her every word aimed at keeping up appearances. She was a sight, tall and regal, with auburn hair pinned so tight it might have held her thoughts in place. To her, life was a stage, and I was to play the part of the perfect daughter, never mind what stirred in my soul. My daddy, Harold, was a different breed. Quiet, with eyes that apologized when Mama's temper flared, but never bold enough to cross her. He'd shuffle papers at his bookkeeping desk, leaving me to face her wrath alone. Growing up under Mama's thumb was like walking a tightrope with no net. She'd lay out frilly dresses for church, scowling when I reached for sneakers, and insist on cotillion lessons when I yearned to tinker with computers. "Thessaly, you'll shame us," she'd snap, her voice cold as a winter creek whenever I spoke of joining my coding club. By 15, I was a rebel in small ways, hiding tech magazines under my mattress, sneaking to the library to study programming. Each act of defiance was a spark, and our supper table became a battlefield, her lectures on posture and propriety clashing with my dreams of a life beyond Greenville. Daddy's silence cut deeper than Mama's words. He'd sit, fork poised over his peas, while she berated my unladylike ambitions. Once, when I begged to apply for a summer tech camp, he glanced up hopeful, only to wilt under Mama's glare. "Listen to your mother, Thessaly," he'd mutter, and I'd feel a pang sharper than any scolding. Yet whispers reached me of a family scandal, some shadow Mama worked hard to bury. She'd hush any talk of her brother, my uncle, whose name was never spoken. It made her grip on me tighter, as if my obedience could erase a past she wouldn't name. My rebellions grew bolder. I'd stay late at school, coding in the computer lab, pretending I was at her approved sewing circle. When college talk began, I secretly applied to MIT, saving babysitting money for fees, knowing Mama had her sights on a husband to secure me. Her plans were a noose, and I was determined to slip free, though I sensed a storm brewing. That storm would break soon enough, but in those days, I was a girl with a spark of defiance, fanning it quiet, waiting for the moment to blaze. As my 18th spring bloomed in Greenville, Ohio, my mama, Evelyn, set her sights on chaining me to a future I'd sooner spit at than embrace. She'd been cozying up to the Cranes, a family with money thicker than molasses, and a son, Victor, who'd make your skin crawl faster than a snake in your boots. Victor Crane, 35 and slick as oil, ran a tech firm folks whispered was built on shaky deals. Tall, with eyes cold as a February pond, he'd visit our house, his smiles never reaching those eyes, and Mom'd glow like he was the second coming. To her, he was my ticket to status. To me, he was a cage with a key I'd never hold. I had my own plans, tucked away like contraband. Nights found me hunched over library computers, applying to MIT, my heart racing with dreams of coding and freedom. My acceptance letter arrived, a secret treasure hidden in my desk, but Mama was blind to it. She'd prattle on about Victor's wealth, his interest in me, while I shuddered at his lingering stares across our dining table. His hand brushing mine felt like a spider's crawl, and his talk of my blooming beauty turned my stomach sour. I knew what he wanted, a trophy, not a partner, and I'd rather walk barefoot through thorns than be his. The night of the Cranes' big dinner, Mama was all aflutter, picking my dress like I was a doll for display. The table gleamed with her best china, but dread sat heavy in my chest. I overheard her and Daddy whispering, Victor's offer to clear a family debt. Some old shame tied to her brother's misdeeds hung over them like a storm cloud. As the meal dragged on, Victor's father toasted to joining families, and my heart sank like a stone. Then Victor stood, a velvet box in hand, and dropped to one knee beside me, his voice smooth as venom. "Thessaly Monroe," he said, flashing a diamond big enough to choke a horse, "will you be my wife?" The room held its breath, Mama's eyes gleaming with triumph, Daddy's face pale as ash. I felt trapped like a fox in a snare, my MIT letter burning in my mind. Every eye pinned me, waiting for a yes that sealed my fate. My mouth went dry, but my resolve hardened like iron. What came next would turn my world upside down, and I was ready to face the fire to keep my freedom. The air in our Greenville dining room hung thick as fog that night, with Victor Crane's diamond ring glinting like a trap under the chandelier. His proposal echoed in my ears, a chain I'd never wear. I pushed back my chair, heart hammering like a blacksmith's forge, and managed to choke out, "I need a moment." I fled to the back porch, gulping the cool Ohio air, but Victor followed, his face twisted with irritation. "That wasn't the answer I expected, Thessaly," he sneered, arms crossed like a judge passing sentence. "It's not right," I said, steadier than I felt. "We don't know each other, and I've got dreams, college, coding, a life of my own." He laughed, a sound sharp as broken glass, and stepped closer. This ain't about love, girl. Your mama owes my family debts from her brother's swindling days. Marry me, and it's wiped clean. Refuse, and they're ruined. His words hit like a slap, revealing Mama's desperation. But they lit a fire in me. No, I said, clear as a bell, I won't be sold. His eyes flashed with rage, and he stormed back inside, leaving me trembling, but free. Back in the dining room, the Cranes were grabbing their coats, their whispers venomous. Mama's face was a thundercloud as the door slammed behind them. "What have you done?" she shrieked, her voice cracking like dry timber. "You've destroyed us! Victor was our salvation!" I stood tall, though my knees quaked. I saved myself from a man who'd cage me. Her eyes blazed, and she slapped me hard, the sting blooming across my cheek. "You're a disgrace," she hissed. "Get out of my house. You're no daughter of mine." Daddy stirred, his voice weak. "Evelyn, she's just a girl." But Mama cut him off, cold as ice. "She's made her choice. Let her live it." I climbed the stairs, dazed, and packed a backpack. Clothes, my MIT letter, a toothbrush, and the $200 Daddy slipped me as I passed him at the door. His eyes were wet, but he said nothing, just opened the door to the rainy night. The rain soaked me through as I stepped into the dark, my cheek burning, my heart heavy with betrayal. Greenville's streets stretched before me, unknown and unforgiving, but I walked on, a spark of freedom kindling in my soul. The rain that night in Greenville was my baptism into a world harder than I'd ever known, and I wandered those streets till my friend Leela's beat-up Chevy pulled up like a chariot of mercy. Her folks took me in, setting me up on a lumpy couch in their modest home, their kindness a balm to my bruised heart. I enrolled in community college, my MIT dreams deferred, using that precious acceptance letter to prove I'd finished high school. But Ohio's winters bit deep, and my new life was a grind of sweat and sorrow, with no room for the girl who'd once hid coding books under her bed. I found work slinging coffee at a diner, then added night shifts stocking shelves at a grocery, and took to babysitting when I could. My home was a basement studio, its walls speckled with mold, the air damp enough to curl my books. I'd collapse on a thin mattress, bones aching from standing, mind racing with deadlines for coding assignments. Every dollar went to rent or tuition, and meals were often just bread and peanut butter. The world I'd known, polished lawns and Mama's china, was gone, replaced by cockroaches skittering in the dark and a faucet that spat cold water. A tech scholarship was my hope, a chance to leap to a 4-year school. But the rejection letter came like a kick to the shins. Due to high competition, it read, and I sat on that mattress staring at my cracked phone, tempted to call Mama and beg. The weight of it all, bills, exhaustion, loneliness, nearly broke me. But Leela's voice cut through, steady as a lighthouse. "You didn't come this far to crawl back," she said over a late-night call, and I clung to her words like a lifeline, setting the phone down with new resolve. Each dawn I rose, hands shaky from too little sleep, and poured coffee for truckers and locals, my smile masking the ache. I coded in stolen moments, teaching myself what the classroom couldn't. The struggle was a forge, toughening me, stripping away the scared girl who'd once hid coding books under her bed. I was learning to stand alone, to fight for the life I'd chosen even as the world tried to grind me down. Somewhere in that toil, a spark grew, a belief that I could rise, not just survive, if I kept my eyes on the horizon. The days of pouring coffee and dodging roaches in that Greenville basement were wearing me thin, but fate, like a river, has a way of turning when you least expect. One morning, as I fumbled a customer's latte, spilling foam across the counter, a woman watched me with eyes sharp as a hawk's. I apologized, remade the drink, and handed it over with a weary smile. "Tough stretch, huh?" she said, and I nodded, admitting to months of scraping by. Her name was Marla Hayes, a recruiter for a tech startup, and something in my grit caught her fancy. Marla came back the next day and the day after, each time eyeing me like a jeweler inspecting a rough gem. On her third visit, she slid a business card across the counter. "We've got an opening. Junior coder, no experience needed, just brains and hustle. Better hours than this joint, plus benefits. You in?" My heart leapt like a fish from the water, and I took that job faster than you can say hallelujah. It was grunt work, debugging code, fetching files, but it was a door to the world I dreamed of, and I stepped through with both feet. Marla wasn't just a boss, she was a mentor, spotting my hunger for more. I'd stay late, poring over her team's projects, asking questions about algorithms and user interfaces. When I pitched a tweak to their app's navigation, she didn't just nod, she built it into the next release. "You've got instincts, Cecily," she told me, and those words were coal to my fire. I took night classes, chipping away at a computer science degree, my days a blur of code and coffee. A project failure once nearly cost me my spot. Bad code I'd written crashed a demo, but Marla stood by me, teaching me to learn from the ashes. Promotions came, first a small one that let me quit the grocery job, then a bigger one that moved me to a clean apartment with hot water and no critters. I faced setbacks, a fried laptop, a flu that kept me working through fever, but each hurdle toughened me. 3 years in, I walked across the stage for my associate's degree, Marla cheering like a proud aunt. The girl who left Greenville in the rain was gone, replaced by a woman who could code her way out of any storm, with a mentor who believed she could. The grind of those early years in Greenville, Ohio, had forged me into something tougher than I'd ever imagined, but it was the spark of Marla Hayes' faith that set me ablaze. With her $75,000 check, seed money for a dream she saw in me, I founded Monroe Tech, a startup aimed at crafting apps for small businesses, a corner of the tech world big firms often ignored. That first office was a closet with a flickering bulb, but I poured my soul into it, coding day and night, learning the hard way about contracts and cash flow. A client's sudden exit nearly sank me, but a clever app for a local diner, boosting their orders tenfold, spread my name like wildfire. Monroe Tech grew faster than a weed in spring, and soon I had a real office, 10 coders under me, and Marla's investment paid back with her share intact. It was during a pitch for a big client, a chain of eco-friendly cafes, that I met Ethan Caldwell. A man with a laugh warm as a summer porch and a mind sharp as a tack. He didn't just want an app. He asked about my vision, my why, and we'd talk for hours over coffee, debating everything from sustainable tech to the best way to grill a burger. When he asked to kiss me one evening, his respect for my say-so told me he was a keeper. Ethan and I built a life as equal as a balanced scale, marrying in a quiet park with our closest friends, our vows sealed with a plain band and a promise to share the load. When Nora came, 5 pounds of fire with her daddy's blue eyes, my world shifted again. Monroe Tech was opening a Cleveland office and I was juggling code and diapers, but Ethan took night shifts with Nora, letting me chase my dreams. Monroe Tech, the sleek little number, wasn't just for travel. It was proof I'd soared beyond that rainy night Mama cast me out. Word reached me that Victor Crane, the man I'd spurned, had been arrested for fraud, his empire crumbling like dry clay, and I felt a grim nod to fate's justice. By Nora's 5th birthday, Monroe Tech had 3 offices, 100 coders, and a feature in TechCrunch as a woman-led powerhouse. I'd built a family and a legacy, not on Mama's terms, but on mine, with love that asked nothing but gave everything. The past still stung, but it no longer held me. It was a shadow I'd outrun, with a daughter who'd never know a cage. The years had spun by like a swift river, and I thought my heart had settled its accounts with the past. But life has a way of stirring the pot when you're least minded to cook. My Nora, 5 years old and curious as a cat, started asking questions that cut deeper than I'd expected. "Mama, why don't I have a grandma and grandpa like my friend Lily?" she'd say, her blue eyes wide. And I'd fumble for answers, the truth too tangled for her young mind. I'd built Monroe Tech into a tower of success with offices sprouting like spring buds. But Nora's words cracked open a door I'd bolted shut, stirring memories of that rainy night in Greenville. Then came a letter, slipped under my office door like a thief in the night, penned in Mama's precise hand. It was cryptic, speaking of family matters long buried and a need to set things right, with no mention of love or regret, but its weight settled on me like a stone. I turned it over for days, wondering what secrets Evelyn Monroe still guarded. At the same time, my team was plotting Monroe Tech's next office, and Greenville, Ohio, rose to the top. Lower costs, untapped clients, and a market ripe for our ops. The coincidence felt like fate tugging at my sleeve, urging me to face the folks who'd cast me out. I sat on our porch one evening, Ethan beside me, the stars above bright as my doubts. "I don't know if I'm ready," I told him, the crinkling letter in my hand. He nodded, wise as an old oak. "You're not doing it for them, Thessaly. It's for Nora, and maybe for that girl who walked away with nothing but a backpack." His words struck true. Nora deserved a chance to know her kin, if they could prove worthy, and I needed to lay old ghosts to rest, not for Mama's sake, but for my own peace. The news of Victor Crane's fraud, tied to whispers of my uncle's old schemes, only sharpened my resolve. Whatever Mama hid, I'd face it head on. So I made my call. Monroe Tech would plant its flag in Greenville, and I'd lead the charge. Nora's by my side. I booked the jet, packed her favorite stuffed rabbit, and steeled myself for the journey. What lay in that letter, and what would I find in the eyes of the parents who turned me away? The road back to Greenville loomed, not just a drive, but a reckoning with a past I thought I'd outrun. The Greenville morning was crisp as we landed, the company jet touching down like a bird settling on a branch. And Nora's excitement at our flying house was the only thing keeping my nerves from fraying. We drove through streets that hadn't changed a lick, though they seemed smaller, like a coat I'd outgrown. My childhood home, once a beacon of Mama's pride, stood weathered, paint peeling, lawn patchy, flower beds choked with weeds. It looked like a king fallen on hard times, and I wondered what troubles had worn it so. Nora, pressing her nose to the car window, declared it pretty, her innocence a balm to my churning heart. I gripped her hand and rang the bell, that old Westminster chime echoing like a ghost of my youth. "Daddy," Harold, opened the door, thinner than I remembered, his cardigan hanging loose. His eyes went wide like he'd seen a spirit, and he whispered my name, Thessaly, as if testing its reality. Mama's voice called from within, and then she appeared, freezing mid-step, her hand clutching her throat. I stood tall, Nora half hid behind me, and said, "I figured it was time you met your granddaughter." The word granddaughter seemed to shake Mama, her knees wobbling, and Daddy steadied her, a reflex born of years. We stepped inside, the house a time capsule. Same stiff furniture, same floral vases, but dust coated the edges and the air felt heavy with neglect. Nora, shy but curious, waved at them, and I introduced her. "This is Nora." Daddy managed a shaky invite to sit, while Mama, ever the hostess, fetched juice for Nora and water for me, her hands trembling. The silence was thick as molasses, broken only by Nora's fascination with the glass bird on the coffee table. I steered her away, but Daddy surprised me, handing it to her gently. "Your mama loved this when she was your age," he said, his voice soft with memory. Then Mama pointed to a locked wooden box on a shelf, her fingers hesitant. She said, "We've kept things, and Daddy fetched a key, opening it to reveal clippings. Every article, every mention of Monroe Tech, from local papers to TechCrunch. My breath caught. They'd followed my rise, locked away like a secret shame. We saw it all, Mama admitted, her voice low. Your company, your awards. I learned then of their struggles, near foreclosure, debts tied to my uncle's fraud, the same mess Victor Crane had exploited. The box was their pride and their pain, a truth they'd hidden as fiercely as I'd fought to rise. The Greenville air carried a weight that day, as if the old house itself held its breath, waiting to see whether the wounds of 11 years could mend or tear anew. I sat in my childhood living room, Nora's small hand warm in mine, her eyes darting between the glass bird she clutched and the grandparents she'd only just met. The wooden box of clippings lay open, its secrets spilled, every scrap of my rise at Monroe Tech, from Greenville's tiny gazette to TechCrunch's glossy pages, kept like relics by folks I'd thought had washed their hands of me. My mama, Evelyn, sat rigid, her polished facade cracked, while Daddy, Harold, fidgeted, his eyes soft with something I hadn't seen since I was a girl. The truth of their struggles, the near foreclosure, the shadow of my uncle's fraud tied to Victor Crane's schemes hung heavy, and I knew the time had come to draw lines in the sand or build bridges across it. I'd come to Greenville for Nora's sake and for the 18-year-old girl who'd walked into the rain with nothing but a backpack and a spark of defiance. But now, facing Mama and Daddy, I saw not just the tyrants of my youth, but two souls worn thin by their own mistakes. The house, once a shrine to Mama's pride, was crumbling under debts they couldn't pay, and Daddy's frame, gaunt from worry, spoke of years spent scraping by after his firm cut him loose. Yet they'd tracked my every step, locking my triumphs in that box, as if pride and shame could share the same heart. I felt a stirring, not of forgiveness, not yet, but of a need to settle accounts, to ensure Nora grew up free of the chains I'd broken. I made my first move, steady as a captain charting a stormy sea. Monroe Tech's new office in Greenville needed a bookkeeper, someone with a head for numbers and a knack for clients. Daddy, despite his years of silence, had both. I offered him the job, not as charity, but as a chance to stand tall again, with the same expectations I'd set for any employee. His shoulders straightened, a flicker of the old Harold Monroe returning, and I saw in his eyes a gratitude that needed no words. Mama's lips tightened, her pride bristling, but she said nothing, her hand smoothing her skirt in that nervous tick I'd never noticed as a girl. I wasn't here to beg for their love. I was here to set terms, to carve a path where Nora could know her kin without losing her voice. The boundaries came next, laid out clear as a surveyor's map. Nora, my fierce little spark, would be raised to choose her own road, never pressed into a mold like I'd been. Mama's old ways, her talk of proper ladies and suitable matches, had no place in my daughter's world. Ethan and I were equals, partners in parenting and life, and no one, not even Mama, would question that balance. I spoke of my marriage with a quiet pride, of how Ethan's hand in mine had steadied me through late nights coding and early mornings with Nora. Mama's eyes flickered, perhaps seeing the shadow of her own marriage, where Daddy's voice had always bowed to hers. I didn't flinch. These were my rules, forged in the fire of that rainy night, and they'd hold firm. The air shifted when Daddy spoke of regret, his voice low like a man confessing to a priest. He'd failed me, he admitted, standing mute while Mama cast me out, his cowardice a wound he'd carried every day since. The words hit like a stone dropped in still water, rippling through me, loosening something tight I'd held for years. I didn't rush to absolve him. The hurt was too deep, the memory of his $200 and that closing door too sharp. But I nodded, letting his apology settle, a first step on a long road. Mama was harder, her pride a fortress, but the box of clippings had cracked her walls. She'd watched me rise not out of spite, but with a twisted love she couldn't voice, and I sensed her reckoning was near. That evening, back at our hotel, I recounted the day to Ethan over Nora's crayons and a glass of wine. He listened, wise as an old river, and said forgiveness could be a journey, not a leap. I looked at Nora, coloring a rabbit with fierce concentration, and knew I wanted her to have grandparents who'd cheer her dreams, not cage them. The next night we returned to Mama's table, laden with my childhood favorites, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, the kind of meal that once meant home. Mama had fussed all day, her need to impress as strong as ever, but I suggested we use the chipped everyday plates, safer for a 5-year-old's hands. To my surprise, she agreed, a small surrender that spoke louder than her old commands. Nora stole the evening, chattering about her kindergarten adventures, her stuffed rabbit, and her love of building block towers. Daddy laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years, and even Mama softened, her eyes lingering on Nora's curls with a hunger I hadn't expected. Ethan shared stories of our life, careful to weave in my triumphs without sharpening the knife of what they'd missed. I watched Mama, searching for the woman who'd slapped me and found instead a stranger, older, her perfect mask fraying to reveal a fear I'd never known. The meal ended with Nora yawning, and as we tucked her into the guest room, I felt the ground shift beneath us, a new foundation forming, fragile but real. Mama's apology came months later during a visit where Nora's boundless energy had pushed her patience thin. She'd snapped about Nora's wild ways, and I faced her, calm but unyielding, demanding she own the past. Alone in her kitchen, the same one where she had once ruled, she broke. Her voice, stripped of its polish, spoke of terror, not just of the scandal, my uncle's fraud that Victor had dangled over them, but of losing me to a world she couldn't control. She thought her plan, her push for Victor, was my salvation, a way to bury the family shame and secure my future. I was wrong, Thessaly, she said, tears carving paths down her face, and I've paid for it every day you were gone. It wasn't perfect, but it was raw, the first true bridge between us. The year that followed brought changes, slow but steady, like a river carving stone. Daddy thrived at Monroe Tech, his ledgers flawless, his charm winning clients who'd never guess his years of struggle. Mama took to Nora, learning to sit on the floor and build block towers, her old rules bending under my daughter's grin. We started family therapy, a notion I'd never thought they'd entertain, and it unearthed stories of Mama's own mother, a woman whose iron will had shaped her fears, and Daddy's father, a gambler who'd left him timid. These weren't excuses, but keys, unlocking the why of their choices, letting me see the broken souls behind the polished front. Nora's 6th birthday came, not in Mama's stuffy dining room, but at a Greenville park where she could run wild without fear of breaking crystal. I watched her race across a field, Daddy trailing in his dusty slacks, trying to keep up as she showed him how to climb a slide backward. Mama, in a moment that stopped my heart, caught Nora mid-tumble from a swing, her arms swift and sure, her face alight with the love she'd never shown me. It was a small act, but it sealed something, a proof of change I could trust. Later, as we cut a lopsided cake, Mama snapped a photo, fussing over my smile, then stopped herself. "Be as you are, Thessaly," she said, her voice soft. "It's enough." That night in our hotel, I scrolled through the day's pictures, pausing on one of us all. Nora giggling, Ethan's arm around me, Daddy looking at his granddaughter, Mama's smile tentative but true. It wasn't the stiff portraits of my youth, all posed and proper, but a messy, honest thing, capturing a family reborn. The road from that rainy night to this moment had been a hard one, paved with sweat, tears, and a stubborn will to be free. The true victory wasn't the jet or Monroe Tech's shine. It was the life I'd built, where Nora would grow knowing her voice mattered, her choices her own. The scars of Mama's slap and Daddy's silence lingered, but they'd shaped me, not broken me.
and I turn their pain into wisdom for my daughter's sake.